Have have you ever hijacked a moment meant for your team to grow? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. You're in a client meeting and you're observing your team member with a client interaction. The team member fumbles a little bit, and here you are, you jump right in and you take over the entire interaction. And so your team member now, they step back and they're there feeling awkward, not sure what to do with themselves, because here's it that you have hijacked that interaction. And so, if you have ever done this, or even remotely close to this, then you may want to stick around for this session. Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of Finding Freedom Through Confidence, where we always say MVP confidence is currency. We are back another week. This is week 3 of our series, The Hidden Gaps of High Performers Who Turned Managers. And today we're going to be talking about the 4-step performance edge system, from exhausted doer to sustainable leader. And so if you've been with us, you know that we have already dismantled the armor of confidence and we've bridged the vision disconnect. And so today we're going to be diving into the other pillar where, most managers finally hit that wall. This is performance. And I have some data, that I've been going through the data with Manager Stone. So I have some data that might feel a little like a personal attack, and it's not meant to be a personal attack. And so I've been diving into the results for Manager Stone. And here's the problem. Here's the thing. Manager Stone took the MVP assessment. And so what I'm doing is I'm distilling these lessons that I've been learning from Manager Stone results. And he scored a 9 out of 10 for delegation and a 4 out of 10 for consistent, sustainable systems. And so this is what I call the dump and run delegation disaster. So yes, you trust your team, but you aren't supporting them with the systems or with the structure they need to actually succeed. And so today I'm going to be giving you the 4-step performance edge to move from being an exhausted doer to a sustainable leader. And for those of you who don't know who I am and you're joining for the very first time, welcome again. My name is Tanique Easy, and I am a leadership development expert, unlocking the efficiency of first-time and mid-level managers so they become high-impact leaders without burnout. So let us know in the chat. Let me know in the chat where you are watching from. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're watching live, type #live. And if you are watching the replay, type #replay. And remember, our thought for 2026 is MVP confidence is currency. So the question is, are you delegating tasks or are you building capacity? That's a reflective question that I want you to sit with as we go through this session today. Going in the wrong direction. Now, here's a core problem. Something that we see. Here's a truth that it can be a little hard to accept even at this time. And so talent alone never builds a sustained success. Talent alone never builds sustained success. And so many managers who are promoted, they were promoted because they were what we call the heroic doers. They had the best answers, the fastest turnarounds, and they were the highest individual doing the output. But there's an identity crisis. See, there's an identity crisis. And so what would happen if you weren't the hero in every situation? So remember, we talked about And we'll get into that. We'll talk about the asking if you think that you are that leader. And so, but your hero identity is actually your biggest liability. And so you have become that bottleneck. And so stay in the door is you become that bottleneck. You feel like you have to fix everything. And so it requires an identity shift. And what is that identity shift? That you are the enabler of heroes. So instead of operating from the identity of lack, a belief that there isn't enough time or that your team is not able to do it as well as you. So, yes, you trust them, but you don't trust them to the point where you believe that they can do it like you. And so, this actually is a massive withdrawal from your leadership account. So we're shifting from the hero who fixes everything to the enabler of heroes on your team. And so without you feeling burnout. So this becomes a massive withdrawal when you believe that you have to be that hero all the time. And so it actually fuels burnout, and it leaves your team in this chronic task mode to get your performance edge back. The shift is required. The identity shift is required from being the hero, again, who fixes everything, to the enabler of the persons on your team. And so imagine this story. Imagine this story for a minute with me. Imagine you're as an elite sales representative. You're an elite sales representative. They were the hero of the region. Again, fast, accurate, always hitting 150% of their targets. So KPI is way above board. And so because they were so good at the work, they got promoted to the sales manager position. So they have the vision of a 9 out of 10 for a dominant territory, but then they go on a ride with their junior rep that they are now managing. They see that junior rep struggling to negotiate shelf space or failing to set up a promotional display correctly. And so because the manager is so stuck in that identity of doer, they fall into the trap of the hero fallacy. They think that it is faster if I just do it. I know exactly what this store manager wants to hear. That's the thought happening in their mind. And so they push the junior rep aside. They push the person aside, right? And after they push the person aside, not literally push them aside, but they step in. They actually step in and take over that negotiation. And they build the display themselves. So they take over, either they take over the negotiation or they build the display themselves. And so what happens is that by the end of the week, that manager is completely exhausted because they are working their job and they're working their team's job. And so they're ending up working 14, 15, 16 hours a day trying to fix everyone's problem, everyone's root. And so they have become that leadership bottleneck. And so they're operating from this identity of lack, believing there isn't enough time for them to coach the person on their teams, or the team, may not get it if they coach them. And so every time that they step in and they save the day by doing this work, they're making this massive withdrawal, because when you withdraw from your account goes down. And so they're making this massive withdrawal from their leadership account. And so they end up juiceless. And as the mental performance coach, Brian Kane, he said that if you are juiceless, then you are useless. And this becomes what it is for the team. If you're juiceless, you're useless to your team because they aren't leading. As this sales manager, you aren't leading. They are actually just a high paid individual contributor who is on the verge of burnout. And so the question is, which identity are you living right now? The doer, so the identity of lack, which is the doer, or the identity of an enabler, the one who allows the team to grow. You are now becoming that enabler of heroes on your team. Those are the two identities. And so let's talk about how we're going to pivot from that. And so this brings me back to the data of, you know, what we've talked about. And so if you're a 9 out of 10 delegates, about a 4 out of 10 when it comes on to system to help you develop that performance edge, then you are running on an overdraft thinking. This is what I call an overdraft thinking. And so you need a personal operating system as rigorous as that of pro athletes. And so here are the 4-step. Here's the 4-step performance edge system that I'm going to give you today to break that bottleneck cycle. And so what's it? The first one is identity intention. Now we're going to go through those. Identity intention. So we're going to pinpoint where current efforts are falling short. We're going to then talk about strategic discipline, creating sustainable processes and support structures for yourself and for your team. Coach, don't fix. So this is where we're going to empower our team to find their own solutions instead of always jumping in, instead of always fixing. And the 4th step is measure impact. So we're going to track your leadership deposits and withdrawals, decision making. Celebrate those collective achievements, whether it is yours and or your team's achievements. And so let's talk about the first step, identity intention. So you set your identity intention. And so we're going to ask, how do I fix? So you're going to stop asking, how do I fix this? And you're going to start asking, what do my team need for me to solve? Or who do I need rather? Who do I need to be for my team to solve this? Who do I need to become? Do I still need to be focused into that lack identity, or do I become the enabler? So we're going to move our focus from doing to being, from moving from doing to being the leader who enables others. So we ask ourselves, where am I still jumping in all the time? Where does my team get stuck in chronic task mode? What systems am I missing? So let's revisit the scenario that we just talked about, where we had that magnificent sales rep who was doing 150% of target every single month, quarter over quarter, year over year, and was promoted into the sales manager position. When that sales manager comes on a ride along with their junior rep, what's going to happen? They're going to set the intention early. Set the intention early before they even leave the office. So this is something that we sit down and we set the intention before we leave the office. And we're going to say to ourselves, I am not here to be the star closer who saves the deal. I am here on this ride to be the capability architect. I'm here to observe and I'm here to empower. And so they decide to be the leader who creates space for the junior rep to think rather than for the hero to do the work. So instead of me jumping in, instead of they jumping in to do the work, to be the hero, to be the bottleneck. They observe and they empower, because they would have already made that identity intention before they leave the office, that I am not here to be that star close. I'm not here to jump in and to do everything to fix it. No. And so this is where you move from an identity of lack, believing you are the only one who can do it right, to an identity of abundance. And so where you're now focusing on developing the heroes on your team. And so as we move into the second step, let's pause to reflect on this question as to what's one area where you're the bottleneck? It may not be that you are a sales manager, but when we talk about this scenario, can you see yourself in that scenario? Can you see where you are operating as a new manager from an identity of lack, believing that you are the only one who can do it right, instead of from an identity of abundance where you're focusing on developing the heroes on your team? So that's a thought-provoking question for us to think about. Now, for step 2, we're moving on to step 2, and that is strategic discipline. So we're going to schedule our strategic discipline so that we can create and build sustainability in our routines as leaders. So what happens here is we need a schedule we can stick to. So we have regular team huddles. And one of the things that from the data from Manager Stone, again, we saw delegation 9 out of 10. But when it comes on to these strategic discipline, where the sustainable leadership is maintained, that's where he falls short, where he scores a 4 out of 10. Because yes, you will delegate, but there's no sustainable process for the team, and that we're talking about having regular team huddles. Schedule those regular team huddles. That's a system, that's a strategic discipline system to maintain that sustainable leadership. So create those regular team huddles. Have those one-on-ones where you protect the space for the team to think, not just to act. So have those regularly scheduled one-on-one conversations. And so we go back to that example of the sales rep, now turned sales manager. And so instead of they spending 14, 15, 16 hours a day spending to firefight and to react to every team error, the manager now establishes what we call a cadence of accountability. And so this includes like a 15-minute pre-game huddle. Before we go out on any store visits, we are going to come together so that we can all be on the same page when it comes on to the goal. So we're going to align ourselves to the goal. So before we go out, we come together and we talk about, okay, what's our goal on this meeting? So that when we go out, and even if there is a fumble by the team member, the manager don't jump in and take over the conversation, hijack the interaction. And so we look at that, and then on a weekly reflection huddle. So we come back, so we start the week with a huddle, we end the week with a huddle. And we end the week with a huddle to assess, okay, what went well? What can we do better? How are we going to do this? Those are setting the strategic discipline. Those are the sustainable routines to protect the team and to protect the manager. And so by using these tools, the entire team now moves in sync, and reducing the managers need to always jump in and take over, because we are coming together on a weekly basis to see, all right, where are we going this week? What are we doing? What's the goal? And we come back at the end of the week to assess, so that we have those routines going on. And so the reflection here is, what system would free you from jumping in all the time? What system can you put in place out of what we have shared? What system can you put in place to free you from jumping in and hijacking almost every client interaction that's happening with your team? And so we move on to step 3. Step 3 is coach, don't fix. And we've been alluding to that. It's about coaching, not fixing. And so as I was preparing for this session, I came across what is called the lazy coaching question. Right? And it was the same psychological coach who says this. Use the lazy coaching question. When a team member comes to you with a problem, the natural inclination is to fix it. That's the natural inclination, to fix it right away. And so let's do the lazy coaching question and ask, what's the real challenge here for you? So we're resisting the urge to take over. We're asking the questions. We're guiding them to the solutions. We're letting them own the outcome. Because this is going to build their capacity. This is going to build their confidence. This is going to grow them. This is grooming them into becoming a sales manager themselves. And so the question that we ask is, what's the real challenge here for you? And so this now actually frees you up to shift the accountability, to shift from the fixing to them being accountable for their growth. So it shifts from your expertise to their growth. And so, for example, when the junior sales rep struggled in that scenario to negotiate that shelf space, and the manager looks to the manager for support, the manager can resist the advice monster by jumping in. Instead of jumping in and taking over the negotiation, again, channel the question. So, Adrian, Melissa, Antoinette, Lori, whatever their names are, what's the real challenge here for you? And then that question will trigger them to think about, okay, what's the challenge? Because it's going to force them to identify what are the specific hurdles that they are going through right now. What is the specific hurdle in their space right now? For example, they may say, I don't know how to handle their budget objection. And that in and of itself will know you are going to ask them follow-up questions as to how to help them to fix this. So they are saying, I don't know how to handle the budget objection. But instead of you jumping in, you ask them follow-up questions and, okay, what were the concerns? So you start with what were the concerns up, because they're saying that they don't have any budget, but what's the deeper concern there? What's the deeper concern? So rather than the manager just trying to fix the surface symptom, we go deeper. We ask those coaching questions. And so When was the last time you resisted jumping in to fix it instead of stepping back and asking the lazy coaching question of your team or your team members so that they could go deeper than the surface and pull out the answers themselves? When was the last time that happened for you? Step 4, we're going to measure our impact. How do we measure our impact? We are going to measure, I call it measuring your leadership balance sheet. So at the end of the week, we're going to we're going to look back at the decisions that you would have made. And were these decisions deposits, were they deposits of clarity and trust, or withdrawal that fueled your burnout? Because again, remember, if you are juiceless, you are useless to your team. And so at the end of the week, the manager reviews their leadership mindset balance sheet. Did I push the rep aside to build the display myself? Because guess what? I don't have time to coach. I don't have time to answer all of these questions. And so the time is not there. And so I pushed them aside and I rushed in and I did it myself because I'm on a time crunch. If this is, if at the end of the week you're reflecting and this is the reality for that week, here's the thing. You would have eroded the reps' ownership of what it is that they were doing. And then you would have depleted your energy. And so when you look back, instead of they taking the accountability and finding the answers on a deeper level, because you would have pushed them aside and rushed in. You would have eroded their ownership, their accountability. And now you would have depleted your energy. And so let's look at the opposite of that. So that's withdrawal. That's you making those withdrawals on your leadership balance sheet, your leadership mindset balance sheet. So let's look at the deposit side of it. So you're now reflecting Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock, you're winding down for the weekend. The week is coming to a close, you're winding down. You are now reflecting on your week. And you are asking, okay, did I use the lazy question technique during a difficult negotiation with my rep? Did I allow my rep to come up with the solution? Did I allow my rep to find that solution? Did I allow my rep to come up with whatever that solution is? Did I allow them to build capacity, to build confidence? Did I allow them to build trust? Did I build trust with them? And did I save my bandwidth by allowing them to do that? And so this is how you know that the shift is working, because when you would have looked at it and you would have assessed your leadership balance sheet, and if your liabilities, if your withdrawals outweigh your deposits, then it's a time to look at it again and adjust for the coming week. If your deposits outweigh your withdrawals, if your deposits outweigh your withdrawals, then this is how you know that the shift is working, because you are now making those intentional deposits. And so you are tracking how your team is growing and becoming even more capable. You are tracking and you're monitoring your own time that you would have freed up to do more intentional manager work and to provide even more capacity for your team to come to you. And so, if the manager is exhausted, if the manager is juiceless at the end of the week, they then they recognize that they have been operating in overdraft thinking. But now, if they recognize again that they are on the deposit side, you are in the enabler mode. And so if you have operated in the overdraft thinking, if at the end of this week, if tomorrow you take your balance sheet, you take your leadership mindset balance sheet, and you would have asked yourself these questions. You would have gone through this and you would have asked yourself these questions, like what we did just now. And you recognize that I am exhausted. I'm so exhausted. I am juiceless. And I've been operating in overdraft thinking. Now it's time to refocus on the enabler mode for the upcoming week. Because when we do that, we're going to ask ourselves, what would success look like for my team in 90 days? If I keep being exhausted, if I keep operating in overdraft mode, overdraft thinking, what would success look like for my team? Or if I now start operating in enabler mode, what would success look like for my team in 90 days? And we continue on that enabler mode path. And so that's your leadership balance sheets. Because remember that every decision you make is either a deposit or a withdrawal. Your deposits empower your team. Your deposits build system. Your deposits is about coaching. Remember that leadership is not a sprint, but it's a marathon that requires that you stretch out your mind on a daily basis, meaning that you make deposits, you empower your team, you ask those coaching questions. So even though we say it's the lazy coaching question, the lazy coaching thing, it's not about you giving up your space as a leader. It's you actually taking back space as a leader and allowing your team the capacity and the space to build, because you are coaching them to find those answers. You're coaching them to bring the solution, not just to come to you with the question, not just to come to you with the problem, but to come to you with the solution. So they come with the question or they come with the problem. As a matter of fact, they come with the problem. You ask them the questions to bring out the solutions, because 9 out of 10 times they have the answer. But when we as managers, we jump in to fix, we do not give them that opportunity to bring forth the answer. We just need to do a little bit more probing, to dig a little deeper, to get them to think a little bit more, to think a little bit deeper. And so the question is, what deposits are you making this week to empower your team? If you haven't thought about it, I want you to think about it now. What deposits are you making this week to empower your team? Or what deposits have you been making this week to empower your team? Because if you are tired of being the bottleneck, if you are tired, if you are ready to stop the dump and run and to start leading with a performance edge, then I encourage you to see where you stand. I encourage you to see where you stand. And so we have something that can help you to do that. And that shift begins with we having 2 spots remaining in the MVP Leadership Accelerator program. So we're going to walk you through 4 weeks of Leadership Accelerator. It's live on Zoom. It's 120 minutes when we meet each week. And we start off with mindset work because you don't rise to the level of your leadership, you actually fall to the level of your mindset. And so that's where we start because we know that mindset is everything. Mindset is everything. John Maxwell says everything rises and falls with leadership. Your mindset is everything because again, we don't rise to the level of leadership, we fall to the level of our mindset. When our mindset is elevated, our leadership will also become elevated. And so the last week of the program is all about integration. So we go through mindset for the first week, then we talk about the vision, and we talk about the vision void, and then we talk about performance. That is where what we did today. And so that last week, it's all about integration. All that you would have learned, all that we would have gone through from week 1, week 2, week 3, we would have integrated it in week 4. And so you leave with a complete personal leadership manifesto and a 90-day post-program action plan. So it's not just feeding you with a fire hose, but you actually get to practice what you have been coaching on, what we have been coaching on week after week. And so the MVP manager assessment that shows where Manager Stone is. So this is a part of the program. So Manager Stone took his assessment and he saw where he is. This assessment is where you get to see where you are. It's a part of the program. This is where the shift starts. And so again, we only have 2 spots remaining. And if you would like either of those 2 spots, reach out to me in the DM and I will connect with you and walk you through the modules. I'll walk you through the entire modules of the 4-week Leadership Accelerator program. And there is where the shift starts. The only thing standing between you and sustainable leadership is the decision to step back and to let them step up. This program can help you to do that. So what's your move going to be? What's your first move going to be? I say to you that next week, we're going to wrap up this series with live number 4, the 3-part architecture of ownership for managers who hate conflict. You don't want to miss this one. We're going to be talking about the hardest part of leadership, accountability and conflict. So again, remember, we only have 2 spots remaining in the MVP Leadership Accelerator program. It's 4 weeks live of Leadership Accelerator, 120 minutes on Zoom. We start off with mindset work because remember, we don't rise to the level of leadership, we fall to the level of our mindset. And I want you to have yourselves a great week. Until then, remember, MVP confidence is currency. Have a great week, leaders.